Good morning. Welcome to our post-Easter monthly Zoom session. Thank you very much for joining. I know a lot of people are still on holiday, and I think some are even joining while they are on holiday. So I really appreciate you being here. So I'd just like to introduce this morning Jennifer Jensen, who's with us from the Global Destinations Sustainability Index. I think some of you already know her, little wave there from Becky. And she's going to talk to us this morning about the work that the GDSI have been doing with a lot of destinations in the UK, and talk us through some of the results, how the UK is performing in relation to other destinations across the globe, which will be, I think, fascinating to find out where the UK stands and how destinations are not only performing, but how they're also transforming the way that they are working towards sustainable regenerative processes. So Jennifer, if I can hand over to you, and Jennifer's going to talk to us for about 20 minutes, I think. Is that right? 20, 25 minutes. And then there'll be plenty of time for questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And hello, everybody. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. We did just practice, so hopefully it should work this time. And there we go. Does that look okay, Alison?
Looks perfect, yes.
Great. Okay. So, yeah, lovely to see you all, and thanks to those who are joining, maybe whilst you're still on your Easter break. It's been a strange one this year, hasn't it, with Easter falling so late, but thank you all very much for joining. And to those who are listening to the recording, hello, whenever you're listening to this and wherever you are. And thank you so much to Alison and Graham for inviting me along today. So as Alison mentioned, I'm going to be talking a bit about the GDS index and how destinations are transforming themselves in sustainability through tourism and events. I know a few of you, so it's really good to see some of those faces. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jennifer Jensen. I am the relationship manager for the UK and Ireland with the GDS movement, and I've been working there for just over a year. Prior to that, you may have known me as Head of Business Tourism at Marketing Liverpool, which is where I was for 8 years. And my background is really in business tourism, although I did start working in the travel agency, STA Travel, for any of you who have also worked there, so also have experience in the leisure side. And I ended up working in the sustainability space through my work at Marketing Liverpool, where I also became the unofficial responsible person for sustainability. And this was really came through as a passion of mine and something that I really was keen to pursue for Liverpool in particular, but also starting very much in the events side, where events were really starting to demand that destinations and venues step up and offer sustainable options. So who are the GDS movement? For those of you who maybe haven't heard of us, it's a global agency based out of Barcelona. I'm actually not in Barcelona, I'm in Liverpool. So we have a team of probably, I think it's around kind of 15 to 20 core members, all around the world. So we work with destinations globally, and our focus really is on how we support destinations in transforming themselves. So this could be we're working with DMOs globally, working with some major events, and also with national tourism boards as well. And our aim is really to help co-create change and transformation for good in those destinations. So some of you will know us for the GDS index, which is what I will focus on today. But we do an awful lot. So we are more than just the index. So we offer training. So we run an academy to try and upskill people in the sector. And we can also support businesses, destinations in developing strategies, action plans for sustainability in their destination. as I mentioned, we work globally. So huge number of destinations that we work with, lots of them in Europe. They've been on this journey a very long time, but we're seeing a lot more interest now from markets in Asia and the Middle East, where things are really stepping up in terms of transformation and keeping Europe on its toes, I think is fair to say. But yes, so a broad range of businesses. So most of this presentation is going to be about the GDS index. I'll give you a bit of background about what the index is and how we've performed as the UK and how that fits in with the rest of our participating countries and destinations. So our aim really is to try and create regenerative destinations. And this slide, I always think, gives quite a good visual as to what we mean by this. So sustainable really is doing less bad, which is what a lot of people focus on. I think for GDS-Movement, it's about doing less bad, but really what the index tries to do is help provide a performance improvement tool to enable destinations to look at things in a way that will help tourism restore and rejuvenate a place. So combining these two things around doing less bad stuff and more good stuff. So we have a positive handprint on that destination. In terms of the index itself, so the GDS index runs annually. So it's not an ongoing process like you may be used to with, say, certifications, for example, like green tourism, where you can join at any point. The GDS index runs annually, and we benchmark destinations against each other. We usually publish the top 40 every year. And on our website, you can check the performance of all the destinations who've participated. But we do rank only the top 40. Last year, we had 100 destinations participating, and these vary from mega cities like Singapore to smaller destinations and some regional areas as well. We have a very comprehensive set of criteria. And this year we have 76 criteria, and they are covered off in 4 different areas. So we look at a destination's environmental performance. And this is very much not specific to tourism. This is around what is the place doing itself. So quite often this data comes from the city council, the regional council, or other bodies within the destination. We do try and look at how that criteria aligns with tourism. So, for example, we may be asking around what is the destination's crisis management plan. Every destination will have one. But we also ask then, does this include tourism and events? And are you thinking about that sector within that as well? So this really looks at things like air quality. So we look at measurements for air quality, how you manage water, and does your destination have a climate action plan or a route map to net zero? So these are the kind of things that may be delivered through a sustainability team in the local city council. We also look at social performance in the city. Or the destination. Some of this is looked at a national level because data is only available at a national level, and we use the Social Progress Index for this. But we also have a big focus on the accessibility of the destination, particularly in relation to things that are important for tourists. So this will include public transport provisions and how that's managed in the destination. And also public spaces and accessibility. It also looks at resident engagement and how you are maybe not only surveying and getting opinions from residents, but how are they involved in co-creating your tourism and event strategies as well. And some new criteria came in last year around funding. So we're starting to see more and more tourism taxes, more and more bid levies, the business improvement district, tourism bids and levies like this coming through, and how are they being used for good in your destination in terms of improving tourism. So very comprehensive in terms of social performance. We also look at supplier performance. So this is a really key section. So working with the DMO, obviously they will usually have some kind of membership or partnership, which includes the hotels, the agencies, attractions within the destination. And this part is really looking at what are they doing. So are hotels looking at third-party green certifications? What commitments is your local airport making? What are you doing to help support your suppliers in terms of education around circular economy, waste management, all of these things? And then the biggest section of all really is focused on destination management. And this is for the work of the DMO. What is the DMO doing in terms of developing strategy that focuses not only on economics, but also on social goals and targets and environmental goals and targets? How are they communicating this out to their visitors and to their suppliers? And what work are they doing in terms of climate action and DEI? So it's very comprehensive. It is updated regularly. So we had a major update last year, and we try and keep this, the reason for updating it regularly is to keep it relevant, current, and challenging. So it has to evolve, and this sector always is evolving. So we are seeing that destinations need pushing to take things a step further. We have a technical advisory group made up of people across the industry globally who help support us in developing the criteria. It's aligned, as you can see, with the UN SDGs and also to the GSTC criteria. So I think it's important just to understand what the criteria means, where the thinking is behind it, and how it all works. And the way the destinations get involved with this is we have a platform that we use called Omni. We don't just allow destinations to say, yes, I do have a strategy tick. They have to upload evidence, which is then audited by a team of assessors. So for every single criteria, we ask for a piece of evidence or more than one piece of evidence on some occasions. So there's quite a lot of input from the destinations, and they do have to really engage with networks locally, like their city council, maybe, and also their supply chain as well. And they can, once this is all in, we have a great source of data where destinations can compare themselves against other places and see their performance. So how did destinations score? So last year we opened the criteria for submissions towards the end of March. We close it at the end of May. So currently our destinations are inputting information as we speak for 2025, and the results come out in October. So we have 2024's results. Helsinki came out top. They actually knocked Gothenburg off the top spot, who had been there for, I think it was 6 or 7 years. And you will see that the top 10 is very heavily dominated by the Nordics, although this is changing. And we saw Singapore, Oslo, and Belfast move into that top 10. Great to see Belfast in there. They've been doing a lot of work in this space and are really pioneers, in the UK, taking things forward. Glasgow has been part of the index for quite a long time. They came in at 12th position, still extremely strong, doing loads of amazing work in Glasgow. And really great to see that both of them have been supporting all of our destinations in the UK as they move through their journey as well, who are starting at the beginning. This is a graph that shows progress over the 9 years of the index. And we've split this in so you can see the top 10 and the GDS index average. And when you start looking at 2016 and see how things have changed and improved, it's incredible. So, we're delighted to be part of that journey with destinations, taking them from maybe not really thinking about sustainability to actually embedding it as part of their daily work, which is just fantastic. You'll see a couple of dips. Obviously, 2020, there was a dip, wonder why. And then last year we saw a little dip, but that was because of the change in criteria. So it became a bit more challenging for people. You couldn't just reuse data from the previous year. You really had to look and create new processes and procedures, and that doesn't happen overnight. So we are expecting this year to see more of a rise, as the criteria has stayed the same predominantly for this year. As well as the index, we also invite destinations through that process to tell us about things that they're doing that are really innovative, that have had great impact. We give awards to the top spot, which this year was Helsinki. And for anyone who's interested in speaking to Helsinki about their journey, they have a fantastic presentation. The Yuka, who looks after this, is always willing to speak to people. So please, do let me know if you'd like to speak to any of our destinations. Helsinki is brilliant in that space. We also offer a Most Improved award. So this year that went to Kumamoto. I'm delighted to say in 2023 that went to Liverpool. So that was brilliant to bring that back to the UK. And then we also invite destinations who are doing some brilliant initiatives. Copenhagen taking home the Innovation and Impact Award. So this is really about how do we communicate these great things that are happening, because it's all very well that the index is there and you're uploading information, but we need to tell people about it. So the awards provide an opportunity to talk about that. In terms of the leaders by those categories that we looked at, it's great to see Glasgow in there. You can see it's very heavily dominated, as I said, by the Nordics, but they've been on this journey for 10 years. And really what we'd love to see is more and more UK destinations leading the way, being innovative and taking charge. And the great news is that in our Most Improved, when we take the data and we look at who's improved the most, we've got quite a lot of UK destinations here in these categories. And I think this is really testament to the work that's happening in the UK, to the support that Visit England has given destinations in transforming their way forward. So yeah, really, really great to see how places are improving. I had to pull out one here, which was Solihull, who were not only the most improved in the environment section, but also one of the most improved in destination management and within the top 5 of the most improved destinations overall out of 100 destinations. So absolutely incredible transformation from Solihull. And it's a really good example of how, when you focus on what needs to change, that you can make those changes happen with a very small team, even, in a relatively small place when you compare to other major destinations. And this is the journey that we kind of see people on as they go through the years on the index. So quite often it starts with a passionate volunteer at the very beginning. So this always reminds me of me when I was in Liverpool, trying to get support internally and really bring together the community. And then you start to get the buy-in of the senior leadership, you get a budget, you get a manager. Marketing Manchester last year, they employed a sustainable tourism manager, which I think is the first that I've seen, very dedicated specifically to sustainable tourism, which is brilliant to see. And we will probably see the results of that coming through in this year's results. And then you'll see that, some of the destinations, particularly in Scandinavia, they have a team of people working on this. So the UK does have some way to go. But this is a journey. It's not something that happens overnight. And I think, it's great to see the small steps that we're taking in the right direction happening. So how did the UK perform in 2024? Very differently, I think. And I think it's really clear to see that the longer you've been on this journey, the more you're scoring. So Belfast and Glasgow have been involved in this for a long time. Glasgow obviously hosted COP26, and these destinations are really kind of leading the way. But really interestingly, we're seeing a really core group of the core cities really pushing above average. So you can see the GDS index average there in light blue. We've got Bristol, Manchester, Liverpool, Durham, all around that kind of area. And then the rest of the UK really doing great work. And I don't think necessarily this graph shows that, because you make little steps every year, and quite a few of these destinations have only been part of this for 2 years. So we will expect to see a good jump this year. You can see performance based on 2023 and 2024 here, with the majority of destinations actually leaping up, which is amazing in a year where the criteria changed a lot. So there were a lot of new questions and new things that they needed to find and look for. And actually we saw the 2 top ones take a little hit. That was because they really needed to look at the new criteria and see implement changes, which takes time. It's not something that can happen quickly. Overall, if we take a look at all of the UK destinations together, we compare it against the GDS index average and the top 10 average. The UK is performing really well, particularly in the environment section. So our destinations are doing well. You know, I mentioned this is the kind of thing where we're measuring air quality, we're measuring water, what's the city's net zero plan. And the good thing is in the UK, there are lots of targets that are set from the government that your destination has to do, or that you have to have a plan for net zero, you have to be measuring emissions. So that's why the UK does well in that space, which is brilliant. I think we've got a great opportunity within the DMOs to do more. You can see, you know, we're quite below average in terms of the index average for the DMO section, which is dark blue. And I think this is, with the creation of the new LVEPs, with support from Visit England, this is something that will hopefully change over the course of the next few years. In terms of how the UK performs against other participating countries, not so great. We're down at the lower end. However, you can see a really solid chunk in the middle or around the average score, which is kind of the 60s, 70s. And I think, you know, the UK will start to move in that direction. It's hard because the UK has a lot of destinations involved who are performing at very different levels. You might have some of these destinations who only have 2 or 3 cities involved. So you do need to take this with a pinch of salt. But a good one to compare us against is Canada. So Canada in 2023 had a similar number of destinations participating as the UK. So I think they had 16 or 17. And then moving in a similar way to us, so making slow, steady, incremental steps. So Canada's certainly one to watch in terms of the great work they're doing there and how they're being supported through it with their National Tourist Organisation as well. So what are the strengths for the UK? Well, the UK had the most participating destinations in the index than any other region. So this is brilliant, because even if some are not performing as well as others, I think it's a great achievement that this is now part of destinations strategy. It's part of their action planning, and it really drives standards up across the whole of the UK, which is brilliant. As a result of that, we've seen lots of new destination management plans coming out, lots of new strategies. Lots of this has been spurred on through the creation of the LVEPs. But the brilliant thing is that we're not just seeing goals in these strategies around economics or around growth of number of visitors, we are seeing sustainability being embedded throughout, which is brilliant. Visit England have been doing a lot of work here as well to support destinations, and we worked with them on a regenerative destination management guide, which is now launched for LVEPs. So you can access that through the Visit England LVEP portal. Belfast have been doing incredible things. You've seen their score, how they went from second to last to now in the top 10 in only a few years. And they've been really innovative. For those of you who've not heard about their Changing the Menu for Good project, I would advise you to go and have a look at this. This is something that can be replicated in other destinations, and it's a means of reducing waste, but also supporting food charities or food banks. In the Northeast, we worked with the team at NGI to create a regenerative tourism framework with their suppliers across a very big and broad region. That's available to see as well. I've got the links, I think, later on some slides that you'll be able to, when you have the presentation, link through. That's a really great piece of work that has not been done in other places before. Visit England are really supportive, as I've mentioned, which is great. And we've seen some really great investments in, not only in the index, so in the Northeast and the West Midlands, so the region supporting destinations within it to go through the index, but also supporting suppliers in gaining green tourism certifications as well. So many amazing things happening literally over the last 12 to 18 months, which is incredible. And you know, the data that we get from the index really shows some of the amazing things that happen in the UK. Most destinations have some kind of integrated mobility plan around public transport, accessibility. The vast majority already have signed up to an international movement in line with the Paris Agreement. If we take the English core cities alone, we've got at least 25% of all hotel beds have a third-party sustainability certification. The UK has generally high levels of commitment to DEI, which we see, and we don't see that everywhere else, which is a real strength in the UK. And as I've mentioned, there's some really innovative and leading the way work taking place by very specific destinations in the UK. So lots to celebrate, I think. As I mentioned, I've just got a few kind of examples of best practice. The Northeast Regenerative Visitor Economy Framework with a link through, which you can have a look at. And you know, this is not about, lots of us talk about growth and is growth bad, but actually some places really need more growth. The Northeast, they had an ambition to double the size of the visitor economy by 2034, but they wanted to do this in a way that works for the environment and the people. So really starting to take into consideration what this means for the place, for the communities, and a really great framework to take a look at, which could be something that would work for your destination as well. If we move kind of to the business tourism side of things, Visit Britain have been working a lot on impact. So we have a couple of questions in the index around what you're doing in terms of impact and legacy with events. And Visit Britain have created a guide for destinations to support them through that, which is, you know, really great tool that can be used to help DMOs and CVBs. Oh, I think I just skipped one there. Visit Belfast, this is what really kind of pushed them forwards in the index, was getting really heavily involved with the City Council in working on their strategy, how they could align that with the destination's own kind of master plan. And they've done incredible work, and they're always happy to talk about that. You can read it through on their website as well. And I did mention Canada and some of the similarities we have there. But you can also have a read through some of the best practices from Canada, which can be brilliant. This particular one, they launched a national regenerative events capacity building program, which kind of gives you some information about how they did that, what they did, and the results of that. So really successful program working in Canada. Still staying in Canada, Edmonton has an amazing strategy. So if you would like some inspiration for a strategy, we worked with Edmonton on this, really to help them embed sustainability across their tourism strategy. So this is, as I mentioned before, this is what we're seeing more of: less standalone sustainability strategies for tourism and more embedding this across the wider tourism strategy or destination management plan. So some really nice examples for you to take a look at your leisure. We also, every year from the index, produce a report. So this is available on our website. You can take a look at that report. I say there's all the old ones as well from previous years. So if you're interested in going into a bit more detail into the data and seeing some of the trends that have been coming out of the index, this is a really great report to take a look at. And that's it from me. So I feel like I've probably gone slightly over time, but also feel like I could probably give you lots more information. And I'm sure there are some questions to come through. Before we move to questions, Alison and Graham, I can see Becky on the call, and I'm really delighted that Becky's here because we have been doing some amazing work in the West Midlands. And I don't know if, Becky, you might like to start off by just telling us your experience just really quickly. That would be great.
Happy to. Thanks, Jenny. Great to see you all. Hi. My name is Becky. I'm Head of Tourism at the West Midlands Growth Company. We are part of the Birmingham, Solihull and Black Country LVEP and the West Midlands Destination Development Partnership. Some of you may recall the major global event of the Commonwealth Games, which really kick-started some of the activity that we wanted to look at for sustainability across the region. And the Commonwealth Games had an aim to become the first carbon neutral major sporting event, which it's managed to achieve, which was a real sort of shot in the arm for a lot of the suppliers and the visitor economy sector who suddenly started to see the reality of having sustainability and regenerative tourism goals embedded in their practice, which made it a little bit of an easier move as we tried to sort of galvanise support. Personally, I think of the GDS index as a little bit like having a personal trainer. It's all stuff in there that, you know, we know that we should and could be doing anyway, but it's really good to have somebody on your back encouraging you to do the extra squats that you need to get those scores up against the index. And certainly as a practitioner, it's been absolutely brilliant. There's been sort of a threefold benefit for me. The TMI, as all of you know, as members or potential members, is very, very strong in the evidence base and the support for sustainable tourism. And that sort of really feeds down through to all of the students that we work with as well, coming through and working with affiliated higher educational organisations. But what the GDS did as well was to allow us to get together as a core cities group, which Jen mentioned in her presentation, and working on the sort of like with like destinations really helped us all to highlight areas where we were struggling a bit, or maybe share some good practice that we'd been able to put in place in our own destinations. So that's been a really, really beneficial way to keep sort of motivation and actions moving forwards. And then finally, because we were able, as a result of the Commonwealth Games legacy funding, to roll this out across our region, we also had that geographic grouping and we could come together. And what made a massive difference for us then is that we had a lead sustainability person called Alicia, who now I'm delighted to say actually works for GDS because she became that expert in the field. And that's now that baton has passed on to somebody else in my team. And it just shows that, you know, particularly Jen mentioned the training that GDS does as well. And you can really start to upskill somebody who's got a bit of passion for the sustainability or regenerative tourism offer and have them become a real expert in the field, and then start to support other tourism officers in your area or other like destinations. And I know that some of you are sort of part of the heritage cities, historic heritage cities grouping. I know there's coastal groupings. I see Sam on the on the call as well. And that's a really, really positive way of supporting each other, just as through the TMI is as well. It all started for us really in a conversation with Coventry, which is one of the destinations in the West Midlands. And as we really wanted to make sure that we were starting to hold some of our sort of industry partners to account a little bit more. Sometimes it feels that the destination management organisations or the local authorities are shouldering a lot of the burden, and obviously it's got to be a shared responsibility. And once those conversations started happening with the local authorities in particular, that's when we really saw some of our destinations take off, because it became, they could see the benefit of the GDS index in meeting some of their own climate change commitments and net zero commitments that they'd made as a local authority. And we benefited on that by being able to talk in a robust and transparent way about how we were working to transform the visitor economy offer in our destination. So that was a win-win. And Coventry and Birmingham have been particularly strong, and Sandwell as well, at harnessing that partnership. That's been one of the massive big wins for us, getting that sort of cross-departmental or cross-DMO local authority relationship a lot stronger, because it's a shared project and the aims are in common, and it's really opened up those communication channels, which has been absolutely fantastic. Solihull put in a dedicated tourism officer with lead responsibility for sustainability. That's been a massive benefit. So if even, and they're and well, as Jen said, they're a tourism team of 2. So, you know, even if you haven't got massive resources, that can make a real difference to have somebody in their job description with responsibility for taking this forward. And then really, particularly for our cities, so Birmingham, Coventry and Wolverhampton, a bit like, as Jen said, where she came from, that business tourism offer really benefits from having those robust markers in place, that when you're putting tenders and bids in for meetings, conferences, events and exhibitions, they're absolutely necessary now. You can't get away from it. All of the suppliers are demanding that we tell them what we're doing in this field. And this is just a really transparent, clear way of selling our destinations, the venues and the meeting spaces, but not just doing it with hot air, which has been fantastic. Challenges, of course, there are some. I think one of the major ones has been about talking up what regenerative tourism is, and there's been some resistance against that, and from some quite senior people. I'll be interested to hear how some of the rest of you do that sort of elevator pitch. I quite often find, as it was representing more of an urban destination, it can be quite difficult to get to the tangibility of regenerative tourism, because in any one street or venue, you don't know who is a resident, who's a commuter, who's a worker, who's a student, who's a visitor. You know, there are many people. You don't get the sort of the over tourism disadvantages that are so obvious in some of our more rural and coastal destinations. And I quite often find myself leaning on the sort of the idea of an island, because it's so obvious, you know, as tourism increases to an island, you need to bring in more resources. There is more evident depletion of the natural resources of that place, and you can see the degradation happening quite quickly. And you can very, very easily see the benefits of a regenerative tourism approach, whether that's sort of to the mangrove swamps and the sort of flood defences, or whether that's bringing up educational standards on this sort of, you know, fantasy island, that's a lot harder to make tangible in some ways in a city. So I'd really enjoy hearing, and if your own approaches, if you're stuck with you know, the leader of your particular council in a lift, how you sell that regenerative tourism piece to them, because we know it's so critical, and it's part of that storytelling, that educational piece that we all need to do to keep this moving forwards. And I think that really, I mean, this is across the piece, and I know we all struggle with this all the time, but there's strain. There is strain on funding as local governments see more cuts. Tourism being a non-statutory service often, you know, sort of bears the brunt of some of those, and we have fewer dedicated tourism officers, maybe some who are sort of working across the more general economic development piece, which then might make it harder to sell in some of those benefits that we're talking about, which is wider than economic growth. And of course, the world's sort of situation doesn't help with the sort of the naysaying of you know, and the downgrading of the importance of our climate and the integrity of our natural resources. So, you know, we've got battles on our hands, but what's delightful to see is, you know, all of the destinations who are working towards the same goal. And I think that can give us all hope. So thanks, Jen, for the opportunity to have a quick chat today.
Thank you. No, that's brilliant to hear it from, a destination who's been working really hard in this space for the last few years. And it's really brilliant to see the transformation that's happening in your place as well. But yeah, thank you very much.
Well, thank you both. Thanks, Becky. Really good to hear about your experience. And Jenny, thank you very much for laying out so clearly what the index is about, how it's working in the UK, and the messages that's giving to everybody and how they're sharing. I've got lots of questions, but I'd love to hear from everyone else on the call first. So if anyone's would either like to put their question in the chat or sort of put up your hand, come up, turn your camera on and answer a question. We've got a question here from Andrew. Jennifer, I think you alluded to this in the Regenerative Tourism LVET presentation a few weeks ago, but this data does focus mainly on cities. We are a very rural DMO, visit North Yorkshire, so does this accommodate such destinations?
That's a great question, and this is a question that we do get asked a lot. The index was designed for cities originally. So when it started in Scandinavia, it was really focused on cities, and it came out of the business events sector. So it was focused on cities that were attracting big conferences. It's evolved over the years, so we have a broad range of destinations involved. Majority are cities, but we do have some regional and more rural places. And really, it's open to any destination as long as there is a DMO that covers that area that matches up with the kind of city or county council. So this is where it can be a challenge in a rural area, because you may have multiple councils, you may not have a DMO, but in order to answer that criteria, you can see that the environment section is very much focused on the council's information. So that's kind of whoever is looking after whoever your kind of municipality is or your local authority. The DMO and supplier sections are really focused on the DMO. So some rural areas may not have a DMO that kind of covers that space. That being said, we are in the process of working up an index that will work for rural destinations. So that is in process. So there is some consultation going on with some parts, some rural areas. So the Northeast, Northumberland is involved in that process. And we're also working with other kind of regional and more rural areas from other countries to try and figure out the best way to do that. A lot of the existing index questions apply to any type of destination. It's really often down to literally how the geography works in conjunction with the politics and the setup in your area. So each area is kind of different. So it's probably worth, if you're interested in getting involved, just having a chat through how it works for you and your destination, where the boundaries are and how that connects, and to see if that works. I think with the index itself, you're obviously compared against other places. So in terms of benchmarking, it is a lot of cities in there, so you'd be benchmarked against those. However, because it really is more important to see it as a performance improvement tool, that really that criteria is there to help you improve your destination, that it shouldn't matter whether you're rural, whether you're a region, whether you're a city or a small town, that shouldn't matter. The criteria still works generally for most places. But I think it's really good to have a conversation on a case-by-case basis to see if it works for you, or whether if we develop this more rural regional offer, whether that will work for you. We're hoping we'll be ready in 2026, but it's still under development. And as you can imagine, it's quite complex because rural areas in different countries can be very, very different and have different needs, different setups, whereas urban areas tend to follow quite similar patterns and setups. So yeah, sorry, a long-winded answer to say it's probably worth having a chat to see how your particular destination could work.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jennifer. Sorry, I should have come on and asked it rather than typing it. So
That's
that's really
no
helpful.
problem.
Thank you. But yeah, I mean, the Visit North Yorkshire and North Yorkshire Council cover the same area, so it's kind of we're part of
Yeah.
the local authority. You see, so it's the same
Okay.
kind of geography, so that they're kind of in line with
Okay.
each other, which is always handy, isn't it?
Yes, that could work. Yeah,
So yeah, but yeah, fabulous. Thank you. Appreciate it.
great, thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Thanks for the question. I just wonder, Becky, whether you've got any thoughts on that, because I think within, the LVEP, you've got a variety of different destinations that have been part of the index. Is that right? So it's not just been Birmingham as the core city, but you've had a variety of different types of destinations. And how's that index, worked for them? How have they applied that to their particular situation?
Yeah, I mean, one, Andrew, that springs to mind is Stratford-on-Avon, because obviously they've got a much more rural base. The the benefit really is having that boundary, which is the same as the local authority, because having to extract data from different local authorities definitely makes life a little bit more tricky. And interestingly, when we were going through the regional destinations that we invited to be part of it, what we had to do was to look at some of those quite practical questions. And one of those was that Stratford-on-Avon is part of Warwickshire, which is also part of the Destination Development Partnership. But we felt that trying to accommodate the whole of Warwickshire, which has got 6 different districts in it, including Warwick and Leamington and Rugby and Nuneaton and Bedworth, etc., would actually be too complex for the index. So we very much split it down to the sort of workable level, recognisable destination, so that it had both that sort of resonance with the visitor economy agenda as well as with that local authority agenda. Having said that, although we've indexed with Stratford-upon-Avon, the other 2 things that we're doing off the back of the GDS index, one is a refreshed tourism strategy, which really puts regenerative tourism at the heart of sort of the underpinning and the enabling works that we're wanting to do across the region. So of course all of those other destinations can come in on the actions off the back of that sort of strategic focus, and they're also eligible for green tourism accreditation. And again, sort of having had a look around at some of the really good examples that Jenny gave that they've been working on with partners, and we spoke to Belfast, and they rolled out a similar sort of regional approach to inviting hotels, attractions, events organisers, business venues to become accredited with a certification provider. We had to go out to market, obviously, and we invited a lot of different certification providers to tender, and we've ended up going with Green Tourism to deliver that programme. So you don't have to be in the GDS index to deliver that either. So again, this is the GDS index is one tool, but of course you can work with several different types and geographies of destinations in some of the other ways that you start to answer those sustainability and regenerative tourism approaches. So that might be somewhere to start rather than, all in for everybody all at once.
Becky, thank you very much for that. Joyce, you've got a question. I think you've put it in the chat, but would you like to say it to us?
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thanks so much. That was a fantastic presentation, and thank you, Becky. It's really great to have the feedback as to how it's working on the ground. I wanted to ask about who you would hold up among all the destinations you work with, Jennifer, as someone who's really championing community and resident engagement. You mentioned surveys, but what is something really innovative? People who maybe have an over-tourism issue, who are managing to find a way to keep residents on side. Be really interested to hear about that.
Well, there's probably possibly 2 that spring to mind, but I can probably find some more examples after this call that may help from some of my colleagues. Copenhagen, very good with resident engagement. Now, you probably don't think Copenhagen has a problem with over-tourism, but the residents maybe think so sometimes that they do. And I went to a presentation that they gave from Wonderful Copenhagen, and they surveyed their residents regularly. So I think it's possibly every month. And they said it was very interesting because you see lots of destinations maybe will send out a survey once a year, once every 2 years. And we all know with surveys that you either get people who have very strong negative opinion responding to them or have a very strong positive opinion. So I think by doing it regularly, they get a more broad view of what it means for residents. And I thought it was, for anyone who's been to Copenhagen, everyone cycles everywhere. So residents cycle to work, they cycle to school, they cycle everywhere. But so tourists also like to cycle. And apparently this was the biggest bugbear from residents in the city centre of Copenhagen, was that they did not like tourists cycling everywhere. So obviously, the tourist board is not going to say tourists don't cycle because residents don't like it. But what they did was they took that feedback and they created more information on the etiquette of cycling in Copenhagen. And they tried to, really make sure that they were doing something to inform the tourists. And I thought that was just it was kind of a fun thing to talk about, that they don't like people on bikes, but everyone wants to use a bike. And just then the tourist board actually took that on board and communicated that properly to visitors, which I thought was a really nice one. And I'm sure they've done other things, which I can probably share. And then very quickly, the other one is in Edmonton. So when they were co-creating that strategy, they had to bring in lots of different groups of people. And some people had really strong opinions about what should be happening with their land. So Indigenous communities, residents, and I think that had been the first time that they had been involved in those conversations, which can be really challenging. But I think, Edmonton is a good example of how you really need to work with local communities, particularly in an environment where there are Indigenous communities that you need to protect. You need to protect their culture, their land, and respect their place. You need them around the table when you're creating your strategies, and they really did that and embraced that in Edmonton and possibly in other parts of Canada as well. But they're the two that kind of spring to mind as good examples of engagement. But I'm sure there will be more. And GDS has a really huge database of best practice. So when the assessors are going through the index, we pull out and share examples of best practice for the rest of the team as well. So quite often you'll see these through presentations like the ones you saw in mine today. But there will definitely be more, so I can certainly find them for you. Thank you for the question, Joyce. Hope that helped.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Really great examples. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joyce. I don't know if anyone else wants to put their hand up or just turn their camera on. But one question I'm very interested in, Jennifer, is how you find destinations change in the first year or two. I think you sort of show, you've talked quite a lot about how destinations have improved a lot over time, obviously Belfast and Glasgow in terms of the UK. But also listening to, I think, Catherine Davis from Visit West has talked about how initially they found that they were doing lots of things, but they weren't reporting on them. They had none of it written down. And, my sense is that destinations in the UK generally are doing a lot more than they probably realise they're doing. And, that to start with, as you mentioned, there are legal obligations or statutory obligations around, some of the environmental issues, which is really positive. But maybe they're not recorded in different ways. There are different destinations doing different things. So are you finding that, in the first year or two, I guess it comes onto the destination management part of it, but part of that management is actually recording and writing down what you're doing so you can report on it. So I think a lot of destination things, particularly if they're small, there are just huge challenges of things that we just couldn't afford to do. When in fact, if you've got somebody who's wearing that sustainability coordinator hat, even if it's just for an hour or two a week, but one of the first things that they can do is, be that coordinating person, that one sort of one-stop shop, as it were, to collect that information and put it in one place and record it and collect that information from other whether it's council, other stakeholders. So there's probably quite a lot that destinations can do at the early stages with that doesn't involve huge investment in different projects or activities. Is that right?
Absolutely. So if I give the example when I started in Liverpool, so before getting involved, I spoke to Glasgow and Belfast about it. And they both kind of said, don't be scared when you look at it and you're answering no, 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 no to everything. But that going through that process and kind of year one is very eye-opening, because it not only opens your eyes to the gaps, so yes, gaps in reporting, gaps in strategy, it also creates an opportunity to connect with businesses that you didn't even know existed and work that you didn't even know was happening. So before I started doing that work in Liverpool, I did not know the person at the city council who was responsible for the net zero plan. He became a good friend and a very good support in terms of the index. And again, it's not seeing the index as oh, we're not doing that. It's not a tick box. It's there to help you see where your gaps are. The questions and criteria have been designed because that's what we know that good practice looks like in a destination. So if you aspire to be a more sustainable destination, then these are the things that other destinations are doing that you probably should be thinking about. And you're absolutely right that you can't report on anything until you have a strategy in place and you've set some goals and you understand what progress looks like for you in your destination. So year one is very often a baseline. It's like finding your network locally, creating those groups maybe of like-minded people who are interested in getting involved, those passionate volunteers, not just within your organisation, but within businesses across your tourism sector. So in Liverpool, we created a task force, which was kind of handpicked individuals from hotels and attractions where we knew they were already doing some really good stuff and could help others in that space and create that network. What you tend to see then in year two is not much improvement, because it takes so much time to, you get your results in October, you analyse where your gaps are, you maybe already had a feeling about where you weren't performing as well as you thought, and then it takes time to get that into place. I think, to draw back on Liverpool again, I kind of did it and went, ta-da, we've done really badly. I need some help. I need some support. I need this. And it took a long time for people to take notice of that. And what you then see in year three, you have relationships established, you've made some positive changes, and you're probably starting to embed it in your daily work, even if you don't realise. And it starts to spread beyond just the one person in your organisation as well. And that's key. I mean, it's really great for destinations who have someone coordinating it. I feel like that is really important, because they keep you, like Becky said, like a personal trainer, they keep you on track. They focus, they have the skill. That's another gap in the UK, is that the skill and knowledge to be able to implement change. But when you start seeing it embedded in people's work, in the marketing team, in your PR, in the convention bureau, whichever part of your DMO, that it becomes second nature to keep that going. And it really does take time. And we do always say it is a journey. It's not something you need to think about trying to do everything all at once. It's doing things that are important for you in your destination particularly. So there may be certain things that are key and critical because of the makeup of your destination. And also making sure that aligns with your city or your council goal. So what are they aiming for, and how can tourism help support that as a key sector within your destination as well? So that's the kind of journey you go on, and the process that it takes. But yeah, you see some destinations who jump up in score after just a year, and that's not the norm, and that's not the idea. The idea really is to see those steady improvements. I always said it was like, if you can do 1% better, every day, in everything that you're doing, you will see that gradual improvement. Really, it all adds up along the way.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's very clear and helpful. I think in terms of how the process works. I mean, we have reached 11 o'clock. I know Roger Carter would like to ask a question. If anyone would like to stay, please do. Are you okay for a few more minutes, Jenny? If you,
Yes, I've just seen Roger's comment in there. Absolutely,
yeah.
that it has to be regenerative, and that's what we focus on, and that's what the criteria tries to encourage. So yes, doing more good. You still have to do the less bad stuff. So, you know, we want fewer cars, we want more public transport, but we also want more resident engagement. We want communities to flourish. We want tourism to give something back. So, yeah, really do agree with you there, Roger.
Roger, would you like to comment on that?
Well, I think it's all there in my point, and it's a point I've made before. I don't like the idea that people think of regenerative tourism as somehow different from sustainability or better than sustainability. To me, they are part and parcel of the same thing. So any program for sustainability has to have regenerative activity with us. I'm really picking up on, I think it was probably the third slide, that one of different levels. I just don't see those different levels. Sustainability and regenerative tourism need to be integral. That's it.
I completely agree. And it's interesting how people use different terminology, and it means different things to different people. And quite often sustainability is overused. Even though it can mean regenerative, it means the same things, but some people just switch off when you talk about sustainability. And when you start talking about regenerative, it gives that sense of regeneration of place, changing a place for good. And I totally understand what you're saying, Roger. And I think it's always quite an interesting discussion about sustainable or regenerative, and it means so many different things to different people. I think it's always interesting to have that conversation.
Thanks, Roger. I think thanks for bringing that up. I mean, we've had this discussion about whether we discuss the difference between sustainability and regenerative tourism, and I think we decided that it's much better just for this particular session, and also generally within TMI. You know, these words it comes down to definition. We've looked at, you know, where we might stand in TMI about some of those points. But I think in practical terms, it's good to, you know, for these sessions, we're really focusing on how are these practical tools used for different destinations. But I think, there is a big discussion that's going on behind the scenes, as it were, about, you know, in terms of definition and what's being used in different ways. But I think we all, as you know, we're all aiming for the same thing, which is how tourism as a sector in its broadest sense. And I think, you know, whether it's visitor economy, whether it's tourism, you know, whether it's that into placemaking, you know, what's really key is that residents and communities are involved in developing a type of tourism sector that really works for them, and that they can benefit from, and that the tools that are available to use, you know, cover that, encourage that, as well as looking at the economic and environmental elements of it as well. So yeah, thanks for raising it. I think it's an important point. And Jenny, thanks for, you know, explaining how that fits into what you do. If there's nothing else, I think we will probably stop there. And thank you all very much for joining us. And, you know, please do let your colleagues know that, you know, this session will be amongst all the others on the TMI website, available to look at afterwards, particularly if you've got colleagues that are away and haven't been able to join us. But Jenny, thanks so much. It's been really insightful. And Becky, thank you for adding those very practical viewpoint from using the index.
Alison, I was just really quickly going to add my thanks to Jennifer as well for the session. And if it's all right with Jennifer, any follow-up question answers, I'll liaise with you, and happy to fill those. And then we'll share the recording after the event. And then also, I was really quickly just going to plug the hot topic. So 21st of May, it's going to be a fabulous event. It's condensed to a 4-hour window online. But we've got some fantastic speakers, and particularly in the sustainability section, got really international flavour for that. So with Slovenia, the Netherlands joining us again. So yeah, great if everyone can join us for that.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Graham. Yes, and I just say in terms of the hot topic, in terms of sustainability, we're really trying to again pick out some really useful tools that different destinations of all sorts can learn from and think how they could be applied to their own destination. So please do join us for that. It's a great event that's shaping up with sustainability, AI, digital, and some strategic context as well from a national perspective. So yeah, great. Thanks again for joining us, and yeah, see you in May for the hot topic.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.